Welcome to session 3 in our series on emotional intelligence. I am Charity Kirigo Kagwaini, and as I always say, it's always a great joy and a great pleasure to meet with us on these platforms to share some of the things that I have learned over time, and I want to also believe that there are things that you have learned over time. So let's share, continue sharing the things that we all have learned so that each one of us can bring our light to the table. And of course, that will make a difference in this world. So we'll dive, right into the conversation on emotional intelligence. In session 2, we looked at King Saul. And of course, we looked at some of, the times that he had, he was tested on matters emotional intelligence, and we were able to see how he responded. And if you have not had a chance to watch that video, please go ahead and watch it on this very channel, and I'm sure it will be a great value addition to you, to your organizations, to your family, to everything that you do. So now we look at David. And because this is a bit long, I will break it down into 2. I will have session 3A and I will have session 3B. Of course, David was, a big household name in ancient times and continues to be a great read for our day and time. Now, we are introduced to the man David as being ruddy. He had beautiful eyes and he was handsome. Again, just like Saul, outwardly, he was a perfect fit to be king. Maybe the ruddy part was not so perfect, but anyway, he had beautiful eyes and he was handsome. Now, David is the second king of the nation of Israel. And of course, after that, we've had many others that have come, that came after him. Now, we will look at 4 different areas and different instances in the life of David and see how he responded as matter as this conversation, emotional intelligence, is concerned. The first incident is when David encounters his elder brother, Eliab. Now, the elder brother, overhears David asking about what would be given to the man that would kill the giant Goliath, who was wreaking havoc in the nation of Israel at that time. And for no reason, the elder brother, Eliab, to David, gets upset with David and actually asks him, "Why are you here? What have you come to do? Whom did you leave the sheep?" Those few sheep that you have been tending to. In other words, this elder brother, thought very lowly of David, his younger brother. But anyway, David asks his elder brother, "What have I done? Was it not just a word? Was I not just asking a question? I just wanted to understand." Anyway, David, he had every reason to get upset with his elder brother at that point. And maybe he was a little upset. But what did David do? David simply walked away from his brother and he went to the next person who would give him the answer that he was seeking. Which brings me to my first question. When you are confronted with people who despise you, or who disregard you, or who are rude to you as you go about your life, maybe an elder brother, maybe a boss, maybe a supervisor, I don't know, somebody, a colleague. How do you respond as far as this conversation on emotional intelligence is concerned? David simply walked away. And sometimes we would think that walking away is a weak thing. But walking away does not mean that you're weak. It just means that you're emotionally intelligent. You don't have to pick on small fights. And number 2, walking away simply extinguishes the negative energy that is coming from that person who is rude to you, always putting you down. We look at the second incident in the life and time of David. Now, after killing Goliath, and we looked at this when we were looking at the life of Saul, after killing Goliath, the women are singing. And of course, they are praising the man David, a simple man who, had just come from taking care of his father's sheep. And, David had already been anointed king, so he knew he would be taking, the position of Saul once Saul faces out. But when the women sing, about David, it's not even a big issue with David. In fact, we are not told that he did anything. There is no mention of how he responded to the women when they sang to his praise. Which brings me to the second question. When people, praise you, when they accolade you, when, you're successful, when you're on top of your game and people are singing your praises, how do you respond? Just as a person, and particularly as a leader, do you go about beating your chest and, making everybody know that I am the one who has done it? We can learn a thing from David. David simply remained the son of Jesse. He did not even say anything, or he did not do anything. At least we are not told. The third incident that I want us to look at. Once again, when David killed Goliath, the commander-in-chief of the armies at that time, his name was Abner. He picks David and takes him to the king. And so for the first time, David is presented before the great King Saul. He is before power. He is before the who and the who at that time. And, when he is asked, "Who are you?" he says, "I am the son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite." Simple answer. If it was some of us, after such a great success, killing a giant, hitting that deer, being so successful, when we appear before power, we would be overtaken. But David simply says, "I am the son of your servant Jesse." He presents himself before the who's with humility. When he is before power, he is just the simple man, David. Which of course brings me to my third question. When you are in the presence of power, when you are in the presence of authority, how do you respond? Especially when you have hit the mark, when you are successful and you have to go and present yourself or be presented before those that make the decisions. How do you respond? Are you overtaken by power? Do you try to prove your point? Or you present yourself in simplicity and humility? That's exactly what David did. The fourth incident, and then we will conclude this particular session. David, after, of course, the great, victory, enters the service of the king. And when he enters the service of the king, obviously, Saul is jealous. Why? The women are singing about him. Why? He has managed to kill the man that was causing trouble in the entire nation. So everybody is talking about David. So the king is jealous. And of course, we looked at that when we were talking about the life and time of Saul. And Saul begins to plot how to kill David. And again, we looked at that, in session 2. Now, when Saul hurls a spear at David twice, what does David do? He simply ducks. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't insult. He's not responsive. It's almost like nothing, had happened. Remember, David is a great warrior. He's a man who has mastered his art. He would have taken Saul head on, but he says nothing. When things get heated and Saul is really pursuing David, what does David do? He just leaves that environment. Of course, he's being threatened by Saul. And of course, he's aware that he could die right there. But instead of fighting back, he simply leaves that toxic environment. And for 8 years, David is running from King Saul. David has some mighty men around him who he could, rally together, and they could, raise an army against, the army of King Saul. But even when he has an opportunity to actually kill Saul, he says, I will not do it. This is what he actually says. He says, the Lord forbid me that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed. He actually refers to Saul as his Lord. David was a man who was great in battle, but he exercised such great restraint. Which brings me to my 4th question. When faced with threatening situations in your life, maybe threatening situations because of those that are in authority over you, maybe by a colleague, maybe by some family, maybe by those who are jealous of you, how do you respond? David must have been very disappointed. For 8 years he was running from a man whom he had not wronged. He had to live in caves. Sometimes he had to literally beg for bread just to survive. But even in his lowest moments, even when he was in such great distress, David exercised restraint. He was a man that really exhibited high-level emotional intelligence. He was a man that carried himself not by what he felt or how he felt, but he was a man that responded to his situations in an intelligent way, even when circumstances were very difficult.